welcome to the next episode of our Recruitment Revolution podcast. My name's Kelly Dunn. I'm the Director for KD Recruitment. We support candidates and business owners across North and East Yorkshire with their recruitment, retention and strategy advice. I'm joined today by Phil Marsland, who I've known for many years. He is the Managing Director and the founder of Blue Tree Consulting. So thank you very much. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Kelly. Really nice to be joining you.
Yes, and I'm excited for today's session. So if we just give the listeners a little bit of background. So you and I first had dealings many, many years ago when I started my recruitment career, and you were sort of the HR for Portakabin in York, weren't you?
That's right, yeah. Many years ago, like you say.
And I think you and I had both both worked in the corporate world and have taken similar paths, left the corporate world and then set up our own businesses, doing what we love, but doing it in a different way and doing it our way and sort of breaking down those barriers. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Corporate world's good. It gives you lots of good things, lots of good experience and learnings and stuff, but I don't know about you, but personally I got to a point where I wanted to do my own thing and do it in my own way, just like you were saying, and for more people, because when you're in one organisation, that's it, you can tend to think that's the world, or it's certainly your world.
Absolutely. So tell me a bit more about Blue Tree Consulting then. So for everybody who's listening, explain kind of where the premise of the organisation came from and who you support and how you support them.
Yeah, so Blue Tree Consulting was founded in 2016, and we like to think of ourselves as being a business consultancy. So why we say that is because we're business people. We understand business and what's on the minds of business leaders and owners. So what do we do in that space? Well, it's about people. So it's about leadership, it's about culture, and it's about HR. And our clients would typically be SMEs, but they've also extended to large organisations, PLC, charities, trade organisations and elite sport, but perhaps a little bit more of that later.
And I think the thing for me with why I wanted to do today's podcast with you is HR in its premise is evolving, and it's becoming, and should rightly be becoming, more people focused. It's not human resources as was. It's all about the people, and it's very much about, as you say, leadership, development, training, investment in your people. How do you retain your people? What can you do as an organisation to make this a great place to work? How do you attract these people? And as you've rightly said, that business consultancy around that is, HR is a big part of that, but so is that leadership and development and training and things as well. I think what I want to do first of all is dive straight in. So you have this premise of this model that you've created, which I find fascinating, the Blue Tree thinking. So explain to our listeners what Blue Tree thinking is.
Okay, yeah, very happy to do that. So all organisations are like blue trees. And why do we use that metaphor? Well, we think it really simply describes an organisational alignment model. So I recently did a post on LinkedIn, which I titled FEE, Forget Employee Engagement, because I think that's a little bit old hat, whereas which it tends to imply something that's done to people, rather than stepping back from your organisation and thinking about it as a living organism. So the blue tree itself, if you can imagine a tree, I'm using my hands already, look. So the roots of your blue tree are your purpose and values. So the purpose is why you are there. And the values is how you're going to be, how you're going to conduct business, and how you're going to be within your business. That is the foundation that supports the trunk, which is leadership. So the leadership of your organisation is not just about your technical abilities and competence. It's also about that behavioural element. What are you doing to make sure that your organisation stays aligned and works well? And it flows from your purpose and values, the roots. That leads you into the lower canopy of the tree, the lower branches, if you like. And that's your whole approach to people, informed by purpose, values, and leadership. And you can call it HR, you can call it management, it doesn't matter. It's your approach to people. How are you going to bring them on board? How are you going to reward them? How are you going to lead them? How are you actually going to manage them into the day-to-day? And even a bit more broadly than that, how are you going to inspire them? How are you going to trust and empower and facilitate that talent, which is what sits in your leaf canopy? And in that leaf canopy are all different sizes, shapes, and colours of leaves, all connected and all aligned, but all unique as well.
Yeah.
Get that from the whole thing, then you can see your organisation. And that's that blue tree thinking that we bring to organisations to help them to see things as they are, give them that invaluable external perspective, but also to stress it starts with you as leaders. Yeah. It starts with your self-awareness rather than let's do an employee survey.
And so why did you create this way of thinking then? You know, when you set the business up and, you know, having come from a HR world, why did you decide to do it this way? What were those problems that you were trying to solve with businesses that got you to this solution?
I think, like many people in the HR space, and from your the early parts of your career, your training, the influences around you, you're taught how to do things right, and you have that sense of pride and ownership and the right way of doing things, and you find yourself saying things like, it's best practice, we have to do it. And at some point you suddenly realise, or you hear the voices around you saying, oh, HR says we've got to do it, or shh, HR's here, we need to be careful what we say. And you just think, that's not right. HR shouldn't exist as a thing that annoys people and tells them to do annual reviews. It should be facilitating, and it should be part of an organisation. And once I'd started thinking like that, you think, well, how do we link that in? We need to understand the purpose of the organisation. We need to work with leaders because it's them and not us who are going to drive this organisational performance, productivity, and difference and uniqueness in their own organisation. So it's stopping thinking of yourselves as a function and thinking about how do you fit within the whole organisation? How do you make a difference? So that's where it came from.
And I think that's an interesting perspective, because I see so many SME businesses that either don't have a HR function or it is outsourced, and they say, I've got somebody that I can call and it's a helpline number. And it's seen as that, like you quite rightly say, oh no, HR are here, who's in trouble, what's going on? It's never, for a long time, I think HR has been perceived as the negativity rather than the positivity. And it is that fighting fire, I think. You know, it's grievances, it's disciplinaries, it's policies, it's new contract amendments. You know, it's recruitment, but it's reactive recruitment. It's somebody's leaving, we've got to refill that gap. It's I've got to do a disciplinary and dismiss this person, so therefore I've got to backfill that job quite quickly. And it's all quite, it's being perceived as being quite reactive for some time. And like I said, this is very much that SME market where either they haven't got HR or they've got maybe one person, and that one person is fighting fire and best will in the world. There isn't enough of one person to go around. If you're one person in a business of 300 staff, it is a challenge. And And I think actually the evolution of the job title is a step in the right direction. You know, we're going from HR to people manager, people business partner, people advisor. So it is that evolution of the role, I think, is definitely going in the right direction, and it is changing to become more people focused and, you know, looking at things and going, actually, if we've got people who are leaving, instead of just reacting and re-recruiting them, let's actually look at, is there a problem here? Let's backtrack.
Totally agree. So our clients, we do smaller employers, but would typically want more of a partnership model, and that would be from 25 up to perhaps 200, 300, as you were mentioning. And it's really important that, first of all, that the organisation has that reassurance that we know our stuff, that we'll keep them right in terms of good practices, not best practice, good practices that are right for them, and the law. So that's really, really key. But it doesn't start with that. It starts with sitting down with people and understanding what's on their mind, where are they at, what challenges have they got, what have they tried before, what are their hopes, what are their fears. And we listen really hard in that space, because whatever we do in terms of actions needs to be aligned to that. And also, when we're writing things that might be a contract, might be policies for them, that it sounds like them, and it's not some sort of formulaic thing that you could perhaps download off the internet or buy from a solicitor's. It's something that works for you right now at this particular point in time. And having that sort of reassurance tends to develop and evolve the relationship as well. So many of our clients now will use us almost as counsel. Yeah. You know, there's a story I can tell about a trade organisation that we helped to evolve in Manchester, and that's become a relationship where now there's going to be some calls or exec counsel once a week for a period of weeks, because as leaders of an organisation or owners, it can be a bit lonely. And who do you talk to? Who do you confide in? Who do you have those conversations and say stuff that you might be a bit more cautious about saying it to a wider audience? So we like to think that we're in it with those owners and leaders of the organisation, and we understand, and we have to make a difference.
Yeah. And I think at the moment as well, in the current climate where it has been a very challenging, depending on how well your business has been doing, it could be challenging 12 months. It could have been a challenging 4 years since the pandemic. I think business leaders have been quite isolated, as you quite rightly say. It is very lonely up at the top. You and I are business leaders ourselves, so we know that. But having trusted partners that you know are going to give you the right advice and guidance, I think, is key. I think that what you've just said, that part about a contract being in their tone of voice, I think is really important. There's a lot of work that people put into attracting talent, recruiting them, and you know, it's all about their employer branding and we're amazing, and why would you not want to come and work for us, and look at all these people that work for us and look at what they do. And there's a lot of investment in recruitment at the moment. So to then get to that point of, right, and here's your contract, would that be a turn off for people? I think in the current climate, I think a lot of people are looking at what's the most attractive offer. And if you've got 2 job offers and one of them is this amazing forward-thinking business and everything's done and they've ripped up the rule book and they're doing things in a different way, albeit legally, but you know, they're doing things in a different way. And then you've got this old-fashioned traditional company, and everything is paper-based and everything is policies printed off the website and contracts from templates from wherever. If you are trying to promote your business as an employer of choice, and why would people want to come and work for you, I think part of that is actually that onboarding. And it starts with, I think, your contracts and your policies and all that kind of thing, doesn't it?
It really does, and that's got to not just sound like you, but you're right. It's got to be attractive, hasn't it? It's that employee value proposition. What's in it for me? Why would I join you? And I know that you yourself and your team help people with that as well, because you have that data, you have that knowledge from the region about what are competitors doing, what packages are attractive, what are candidates looking for. And I read somewhere the other day that more than 50% of, let's just say younger candidates are asking in the recruitment process, do you do hybrid working?
Yeah.
Now, that's a hot potato, and Labour were looking at that apparently, but it's not gone in the employment bill at the moment. But where do you want to be as an employer? Now, if you're looking for bar staff, now it's pretty difficult to work from home.
Yeah.
You need to be challenging your own thinking and your own values as an employer about, what am I trying to do here? Do I want the top talent in this organisation, and how do I facilitate a more flexible approach to employment? Or have I got a value where I want everybody in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? And is that actually damaging my business?
Yeah.
As it can be.
And I think that's a really good point, actually. So, there's a couple of things I want us to dissect as part of this call, and a few of those are kind of the key patterns and the key things that you and I are both seeing in the current climate. So one of those is the flexibility in working. And I say flexibility in working because it's not just about having a hybrid model. I've seen very much since the pandemic, everybody got sent home from work. Everybody was forced to work from home, unless you were, like you say, maybe working in a factory, you're manufacturing, you've got to be there to use that equipment. But very much the office staff were sent home in a large number of businesses across the area. And then slowly but surely, over the last 3 to 4 years, business leaders have been trying to get their people back in. I've seen in the media, obviously Google have done it, Amazon have done it. So there's some big key players that are even doing this that we never thought probably would. And I'm still seeing candidates tell me one of the main reasons they're looking for something else is because they want that flexibility back, or they want the option to be able to work from home occasionally, and their employer isn't necessarily giving them enough or giving them that at all, whereas they did have it as part of the pandemic. And I think there's different reasons that I'm seeing why this is happening, but we are in a market where employers and employees are on slightly different pages at the moment, and it is posing a big challenge in terms of retention and recruitment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was with one of our retained clients in Leeds City Centre last week, and we were having just that discussion, or a version of it, about their challenges in attraction, and not just in bums on seats, but in getting the talent that they want for their quite cutting edge business. But they'd got somewhat of a bit of a dated approach to their terms and conditions. And but fair play to them, they were reflecting on that and saying, what do we need to change here? What's competitive? What are people actually wanting and looking for? And it's not just about salary. It is about holidays and the approach to working time and working place. And sometimes it's about the benefits as well. What comes along with it. If you've got a fancy office in Leeds with a rooftop terrace, and a gym on site, well, that's a big part of that EVP, that employee value proposition to certain parts of the demographic that you're trying to recruit from. So it is challenging your own thinking almost. So it literally comes back to what I was saying a moment ago with the Blue Tree model. What's your level of self-awareness about your own impact, your own behaviours, and your own thinking on the effectiveness of your organisation? And do you need to have a bit of a rethink and challenge yourself about that?
Yeah, and I think the other side of that is I get a lot of smaller organisations saying, well, I can't compete on benefits and I can't compete on salaries and I can't compete on holidays and things because we're too small. And I throw it back and say, well, what can you do that's relatively low cost to you, but could be really high value to your employees? And that might be things like, can you give people the birthday off? We're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and there's a client that I spoke to recently, and I was liaising with the HR manager, and they'd confided in me that they had a number of permanent full-time staff who were having to use a food bank.
Yeah.
And their salary bandings were set. There wasn't anything else they could do in terms of increasing salary. So what they decided to do, which I absolutely loved, was they decided as a business to do a blanket breakfast. And it's not sausage sandwiches. It was, we put fresh bread in the kitchen. We've got 2 or 3 versions of cereals. We obviously provide tea, coffee and milk anyway. And it's, cereals and bread don't cost the earth. It wasn't an organisation that had loads of staff either. So, it was relatively low cost to the business, but high value to the people because they could come in and, grab their breakfast, whether that's cereals or porridge or toast. They had fresh fruit deliveries every week, so people could get snacks. And it just meant that, those people who were having to use a food bank weren't embarrassed about anything because this was a blanket for everybody. And as a business, it was like, we're investing back in you. We're looking after you. We're going to give you breakfast because actually it's the most important meal of the day. We want to fuel your brain and we're going to get more out of you if we support you in this. But knowing full well that the employees that were financially struggling, that might be the only meal of the day that they're eating. And actually, it's looking after their well-being as well. So, that for me was a really great example of a small thing that you can do for your people. Things like personal development. There is lots and lots of government-funded training out there that loads of businesses don't tap into. Yeah. And I speak to them and they go, well, I haven't got promotions to offer. It's quite a flat structure. I can't keep hold of people because I can't, there's no extra training to do because there's nowhere else for them to go. There's no promotions. But actually what you can do is go, well, actually, there is lots of different things. There's digital skills training around. There might be Microsoft training. There could be personal development, confidence, and all sorts of different things like future leaders, all those things that are run by different local authorities with, at the moment, it's shared prosperity funding, which runs out in March, but there's loads of different pots of money with free, either fully funded or part funded training courses available that organisations can tap into for their staff. And you're then showing that you're investing in that person, giving them training on something that's not necessarily job relevant, but could be relevant to them as a person. Your retention will be better. And actually, it's going to cost you very little. If it's fully funded, it's costing you nothing other than allowing them the time to do it. And I kind of see that there's lots of these opportunities that small businesses can really think about. And as you say, it's thinking outside the box and going, well, what else can we do? No, we're not a Nestle and we haven't got all that money to throw into all these benefits and all that kind of stuff. But not all your staff will want that either.
No, that's right. That's right. And the more creative you can get, the better. And those stories and that investment in people, if I call it that is going to have benefits. So all of those lists of different things, that has potential to improve not just the person, but improve how they do the job or how the organisation tackles various different things. So it can be advantageous for business as well. Yeah.
And I think one of the other challenges I'm seeing at the moment that a lot of businesses have been struggling with, and it's a post-pandemic challenge, is attendance. Now, I know I was a governor of a school up until fairly recently, so I know even at schools they're struggling with attendance post-pandemic, but the whole workforce is struggling as well. Now, part of that is, I think, around supporting your people more with mental health and wellbeing support. Mm-hmm. But also it's, are they embedded in your culture do they want to come to work, or are they disengaged? And therefore, they might get Mondayitis. And, if you track that, have you realised that every third Monday they've taken the day off, and, those kind of things. But have you seen that from kind of your clients? Are they saying that there's issues around time or attendance or managing their people in that way?
I think it depends on how mature you are as an organisation. So the more mature organisations recognise the simple things that you can do to manage absence levels. It's something that we were doing back in the day at Portakabin to bring that down, where it was almost had become like a culture of how many days you have off, and obviously there's some long-term absences and illnesses in that, but you can deal with those through occupational health more effectively, but rather than just leaving them. But also for the short-term absences, it is about educating managers in how to do return to work interviews, how to talk to somebody about their absence levels and their patterns, and how to be very reasonable with them and say, look, this is just not questioning why you're off, but it's too much. It's too much for our organisation to bear, and we need you to improve that. And then making a note of that, and then monitoring it. And obviously, if people don't improve, then you go through a series of warnings. In my experience, is people either do improve and perhaps go from a bit of surprise and shock from the initial conversation to thinking about, I will go in, or they leave. So there's very, very simple things you can do to manage that absence. But on a bigger picture, it's about understanding why they're feeling like that, why they're not aligned to what you're trying to achieve as an organisation. Is there some sort of failing there in how they're being managed, or is there something else? Is there something else going on? So that root cause is really, really important, and that links into me, Kelly. I like telling stories and things. The approach that we take when we're using Blue Tree thinking, and we're going into organisations and doing a diagnostic for them. So often it might be a crisis situation like Yorkshire Cricket. I've mentioned it twice now. I'll come back to it.
Tell the story. Tell the story now, and then we can go on to what happened, because it's a great story.
Okay. So I was contacted by a solicitor that I know in Leeds who asked if they wanted my name put forward for some emergency HR support at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Right in the teeth of the crisis, you may remember the racism scandal, which was across all media, really, Yorkshire Post, BBC. The governing body were scrutinising the club, and also a parliamentary committee had got involved, the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Parliamentary Subcommittee. They were in a really difficult situation and needed that support and expertise, which they didn't have. I knew when I was walking in, because 16 people had left the club, been exited. I won't get into the legalities of that and the rights and wrongs, but it meant that the people who were left behind were confused, frightened, angry, upset, and they still had to deliver everything that was demanded of them in terms of transforming that club. So in going in, I decided that, okay, there's a big job of HR work to do there, but people just need some support. They need somebody who they can talk to, that's going to be confidential, that's not judgmental, that will just listen. So did that for a period of time, and then having promised them 6 days, I said, I can do 6 days. Looking at my diary, I can do 6 days before Christmas. Day 3, the acting chief exec at the time said, probably should have asked you this, but we've got to recruit for the coaching staff and the physio and sports science and all of that lot to replace. I said, yeah. we've put adverts out globally and they've got your name on as a person to write to. Is that okay? Well, yeah. I said, oh, good. Darren Goff, England and Yorkshire legend, will be in touch. Look after him, will you? You need to guide him through the recruitment process. Right. So before you know it, I'm working with Goffy hand in hand. We're designing a process which the ECB, who were involved, said it was the best process in cricket at the time. I thought it was standard, not very funky. It was just but it was transparent and it showed good governance, which was a key thing. They said it's the best that they've seen in cricket, which perhaps said more about cricket than my abilities. But so and then you start to get sucked in because you're embedded. You care about the people. You care about this cherished institution, really. And then I'm involved in the EDI plan, which was a requirement for them to get Test cricket back. And at the same time, I created something that I called a people and culture roadmap to evolve how they did people and culture, or HR, from policies, from contracts, to how they brought people on board, from working time, HR system. And in that process, you're educating people, leaders and managers in the club. And I'm delighted to say that although it was pretty dramatic and traumatic with the scrutiny and pressure that was there, that we did resecure Test cricket and save the club from potentially going out of business if they'd lost that revenue. And I've got a wonderful picture on the top floor of the pavilion on the first day of the Test match. We sort of sat back, just, played a little part in that. That's good.
And I think that's testament to kind of the knowledge and experience that you have, is the very quick impact you made with the challenge that was put before you. You know, I think it's a great story. Everybody saw in the media what was going on with the cricket club, and you know, it was all over. I think that the challenge actually sometimes when you're trying to recover your employer branding is when negativity is put out there, everybody sees it. But then when the good stuff happens, that's not seen, is it? It's the same analogy. If you go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal, you will tell 10 people, I've had a bad meal. The meal was crap. The service was rubbish. It cost a fortune. If you go and have a really good meal somewhere, you might just tell your best friend. You'll tell one person. And I think that's the challenge. If you've got a business like the cricket club, for instance, that's gone through all of the bad press, which is kind of to the extreme, and this is why it's a good example for us to share today. Everybody saw that. It was national. But the work that you did was phenomenal, and recovered everything. But that was then not broadcast. It's only the people in the local area that suddenly go, all right, actually, you know, the cricket, the governing body, they are like, right, you've solved these problems, you've fixed this, you've done this, you've implemented that, that's great, right, the standards are back, we're okay with that. But there's no press release about that going on. So as a business, that employer branding bit is, you know, once you've sorted out what's going on internally, you've got to rebuild your employer branding in the local area, haven't you? And that's,
really do.
It's a challenge.
A lot of that is about, you know, being resilient, about celebrating the successes, being confident in that, and just continuing to do that over time, and it'll rebuild. I had another thing that I wanted to share about something that wasn't quite a crisis, that was a bit more controlled. So this was it's an organisation called Cooperatives UK. So they're the trade body for the co-op movement nationally, headquartered in Manchester. Are we allowed to say that on here? We're in Yorkshire, aren't we? We're in Yorkshire.
No, it's okay.
Anyway.
Nobody will hold it against you.
I was brought in we were brought in to do a diagnostic there, to look at what is happening in terms of people and culture, leadership, HR, because they recognised that they weren't quite things didn't feel right. They were a very old organisation, 150 years old, that they weren't quite delivering the value to their members, but they didn't quite know why and what to do about that. So we came in, did that leadership, culture, people, HR diagnostic, presented the report back to Chief Exec. I'll never forget the phone call. She phoned me up. She said, I'll respond like properly to this, but thank God. I thought I was going mad. I couldn't get my head around it. You've articulated in 2.5 weeks what I couldn't get to. Don't go anywhere. I need you to implement all those recommendations. Okay, let's do that then, which was a restructure, reshape, form a new leadership team, and work with them as the first port of call. So this is Blue Tree thinking in action, because that needed to form and they needed to understand themselves and what they were trying to achieve before they could cascade that to the rest of the organisation. We use some psychometrics, we like insights, other tools are available, and the relationship really good, and they actually won an award as best organisation in the Manchester area 2 years after we'd started, and the relationship still exists now. So that's a bit more of a sort of controlled environment where you plan that and project manage it. And but yeah, they're both. I don't know which fills me with more pride. I've been born that side of the hills, but I've been married a York lass. I don't know.
I know I'm the same. I'm from Manchester, but my husband's Scarborough born and bred, so I straddle both sides.
Yeah.
I think you've touched on that there as well, because I think culture so when I speak to job seekers at the moment and I say to them, what's important to you in terms of your next employer, salary and remuneration are not the top. Yes, they want to be paid relative to the job that they're doing. However, put that aside, they want to go into an organisation where the culture aligns with their values, where they go in and they want to know that what they're doing is making a difference within that business, that their manager cares about them, that they're not just a number, that they're a person, and what difference can I make, and how are you going to support me as a person, not just as a we support everybody blanket. It's this is me. How do I get support? What do you do for me? Do you listen to me? And and I think that culture piece is really, really important. And you touched on that with the cooperative, because it's got to come from the top down.
It really does. Yeah.
And that's the important thing for me is in the pandemic, I did a lot of work on getting guest speakers to do some roundtables for us. And one of the organisations that spoke for us was Benenden Healthcare in York. And they spoke about a big piece of work that they'd done around supporting their employees with health and well-being and the journey that they were going on. Now, this was in the throes of the pandemic, where everybody was working from home, and it was Teams calls, Zoom calls, Google Meets. It was all back-to-back meetings. And they realised that their people were getting a bit kind of Zoom fatigued. So their senior leadership team, the chief exec, set the precedent that nobody was going to book a virtual meeting or any meeting between the hours of 12 and 2. Everybody had to get a break. Everybody had to step away from the desk, go out for a walk, and have no contact with a computer screen. But it was from the top down. And it was because the chief exec didn't put it in his calendar, everybody else was then frowned upon if you then did it. But what it meant was people were taking the breaks that they needed, because when we were all working from home in lockdown, there was no start and finish times. You got up in the morning, logged onto your computer, went and had your breakfast, came back again. Your days just blurred. There was no 9 to 5. It was a wake up and go to bed kind of thing. But they'd realised that this was something that was really important, that people needed to have that break. And it's that thing of, if you want to make a difference, it's got to come from the top. If it's rotten at the top, you can't change the bottom. Your people will leave if the top isn't fixed. So you have to really invest and go, well, what kind of culture do we want and how do we get there?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's that famous metaphor. I think it's a book actually. That the fish rots from the head down, which is an unpleasant metaphor, but I think it's quite effective. And what you're saying there, Kelly, touches on what I mentioned about leadership behaviours, because okay, that starts with self-awareness, but you have to role model the future that you want.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to live and breathe it. It's not about sticking some signs on the wall or having a form that you make people fill in, or some nice messages. I mean, yeah, okay, they're important, but what example are you setting? It's a really, really key thing. Yeah, and I think as well, there's another part. We're talking about sort of top down, or it's kind of a bit bottom up. My model, isn't it? Because it's but anyway, it doesn't matter. You need to be celebrating the successes as well, and that's about the stories. I mean, obviously, I like storytelling stuff, but there's hundreds of stories in your organisation about people as individuals and their successes and their challenges as well, and you need to be talking about that. Just want to go back a minute. So you just provoked something at me about, you talk about Benenden Healthcare and recognising people's well-being.
Yeah.
And there's quite a nice Venn diagram on our website that shows our services. So we've got leadership, HR, management, development, Venn diagrams. So they all intersect. In the middle is well-being and inclusivity. And what we say about that is, if as a leader, HR practitioner or a manager, you're not being mindful of that as part of your job, you're not doing it right. It's part of what you should be doing. So not just your behaviours, but your actions as a manager, what you write down, how you conduct yourself as an HR practitioner. Right in the centre, in the heart of it, is well-being and inclusivity.
And I think that's absolutely right. And what was very evident, I think, in 2020 and certainly 2021 and going into 22 was well-being was at the forefront of everybody's minds. Your workforce was sent home, they were furloughed, people got made redundant, and there was a lot of isolation. So everybody was kind of going, how do we look after our friends, our families, our colleagues, our employees? I think what's happened is because of the challenges that a lot of businesses have faced economically in the last year or so, is it's been head down, let's get through this challenging time. Yeah. And I think well-being unintentionally has fallen by the wayside in some respects, in some businesses. Employees are still very much focused on it, but I don't think it's an intentional thing. I think it's a case of businesses have had to hunker down and go, right, well, we're getting through a change of government. We're getting through interest rates not coming down. We're getting through inflation being high. At the moment, it's we've got a new employment bill coming in, and what does that mean to me in terms of day one rights that are changing? And everybody's kind of going, oh, it's just lots and lots and lots and lots of changes in the economy, in your business, in what you do, the services you offer, how you run your business, and everybody's sort of chasing the tail a bit. And the thing that I feel, well, two things I feel that have fallen by the wayside. One is looking after the well-being of the people, and the other is investing in training and development.
I totally agree with you. Those are the things that do fall off. I think if you're smart and you're running a business, you don't let them fall away. You make sure that there's something there, and there can be, as you described in your story earlier about this client of yours putting on these breakfasts, it can be a relatively small thing, but it's smart as well, because if you're not looking after your people, you're not looking after your business there. And arguably that should be your primary role, because unless you've got some whizzy business that doesn't need any people, they're the ones that make it all happen. So yeah, you might need that external support, whether it be through alignment specialists like us, or external HR practitioners, or yourself with that in that recruitment space. But you've got to be mindful of it all. It's a bit like a the employment bill that Labour have put in, and the things that went in it, and things that have got left out, and people scratching their heads about timescales and stuff, day one rights. There's lots of things you can do to prepare for what's probably inevitably coming. But some of my advice to our clients is just do better. Do better on recruitment. Do better in induction onboarding, and do better on, facilitating for your people. That's the answer.
Yeah.
So rather than coming at it from a fear point of view of, what's going to happen to business with all this legislation? Well, it's coming. So embrace it and just do better.
And I think the thing with this is, and it's come across from speaking to you today, is it's communication. So, talking to either somebody like yourself or somebody like me, or talking within your senior leadership team, but then talking to your people. It's not to do things like this properly. It's not a box ticking exercise. It's what can we do better? How can we do things better? Ask people what they want, what's important to them. Ask people how they're feeling. Find out what makes your company a great place to work, and why would people want to work there, and look at ways in which you can promote that. If people are leaving, find out why they're leaving. When it comes to recruitment, go, well, what are we doing and how can we improve that so that we become an employer of choice? And it's asking lots of questions, and it's communicating with the right people, rather than just filling out forms and tick box exercising. And I think very much what you were saying about, the roots of kind of what you do with that purpose and values, everything should start with, well, why are we doing this?
It really should. It really should. And you've got to think about, what are you going to drop off, and why are you dropping it off? Because you're busy and you're under pressure. And do you see, as a leader of an organisation, just coming back to the sort of what you can do for your people, and communication is a really key part of well-being. People feeling heard, feeling that they're visible, that they matter, that they make a difference. So as a leader, you shouldn't be shipping out well-being to HR as a little project, which ends up with bowls of fruit in the canteen. That's just abrogating your duties. It's slopey shouldering. It's part of your job, and it's part of your job as a manager. The same as it is as an HR practice. It's part of what you do. So who's giving you permission to just say, I'm under pressure, that don't matter?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't
But I
matter.
think that goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning about leadership and investing in your leaders. Because if your leaders haven't been invested in themselves, they're not going to invest in their people either. And that whole thing of, as you just said, it's a Richard Branson quote, isn't it? Look after your people and they look after your customers.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's the thing. So, think about either yourself, invest in yourself. If you're the leader, what can you do to better yourself? Who do you need to surround yourself with to make you a better leader? If you've got a senior leadership team, right, well, how do we invest in them? What do we need to do for them? Whether that is, a strategy with somebody like yourself that can come in and do a bit of a diagnostic and work with you to do that, or whether that's training and development. Like I say, there's a lot out there that's partially funded, at least at the moment, so you can do things like that. And then look at your leaders and then ask them and go, well, what support can I give you to then support your team, and how do we get the best out of your team, and how do we look after them, and how do we get their productivity up? And part of that might be, actually, not everybody should be coming back in the office. Going back to that hybrid flexible working, if productivity is down, why is it down? Is it because they're all working from home, or is it because we've got a broader issue of we're not doing performance management better? And it could be part of that. But I think it's all about stopping and taking a minute and looking at things from an outside perspective, and taking your rose-tinted glasses off and going, hang on a minute, before we do anything else, let's just look and stop and have a conversation and think about it. Then you can go, right, let's review our retention. Let's review our employee engagement. Let's review our recruitment strategy. Let's review how we approach things from a people perspective. Let's review our training and development. don't do it because you think you should. Do it because it's actually the most important thing to do.
Yeah. I liked what you said in all of it, but in the middle of that about stop and pause, and it's one of the things that I teach. I'm an exec coach, but also got a diploma in mental health and wellbeing, and I know in lots of businesses that we work with, particularly manufacturing, engineering, construction related, that there are people, generally men, of action who fix stuff, who rush around fixing things. Well, that's not leadership. So, it's partly to do with the stress response, the amygdala, fight or flight. There's an issue, we need to fix it, all that sort of stuff. To lead, you've got to stop, you've got to pause, you've got to slow down and think more holistically. You might need external help with that. You might be have not been invested in and be underdeveloped as a leader, and that takes some time. So that's where the challenge comes, because you're reacting to day-to-day problems and stuff, and firefighting, and I love being a fireman and putting out fires, and but you're supposed to be a leader. And you end up managing like loads of layers down and actually squashing the people below you who should be capable of dealing with those sorts of things with your guidance, with your leadership. So often that helping people to slow down and pause and breathe is part of the challenge, and then to reflect and take the rose-coloured glasses off, as you said, or have somebody come in, because one of the phrases that we sometimes use is we hold the mirror up. So it looks like this. You might not like it, but you've actually engaged us to tell you that.
And that is the challenge, when somebody wants advice, they might not like the advice that you're giving, but they've asked for it.
Yeah, exactly. And fundamentally, we're trying to make a difference. We're not as a consultancy, as a business, we're not just fee earning and ticking a box and walk away. Obviously we'd like the invoice paying, but but we want to make a difference. We want to share in some of those success stories and have that satisfaction and pride, and being able to tell the tale as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing for me is, I think anything that's worth doing, it's worth doing well, and there is no quick fix in anything. You've got to invest back, whether that's investing in time, investing in your people, or investing money into something that's going to make a difference. But you have to be able to invest something to make a difference. You can't just go, I've got a culture issue, so what I'm going to do is plaster our values on the wall, because then everybody knows what they are. That doesn't work in my eyes. We need to change our recruitment strategy. So what we're going to do is write a quick advert instead of copying and pasting a job description. That's going to solve problems. It might, but it's not. You've not got a strategy there. You've just changed one bit of it. And I think this is the thing when it comes to changing approaches. You going in doing a diagnostic, me going in doing a diagnostic, or the director of the business stopping and doing their own diagnostic of going, where are these problems? Let's sit and have a conversation about this, and then once we've identified where the problems are, let's work backwards to find what the cause was. We're not putting a plaster over a cut or a graze. We want to know why that happened so we can prevent that from happening again, and then moving forward, because both you and I have the same goal with the businesses that we work with. Is we want these businesses to be great places for people to work. We want them to attract the right talent. We want them to retain the right talent, and everything we do is within Yorkshire. We want this to be one of the best places for people to come and work, and there are some amazing businesses here, and it's about everybody utilising the tools that are around them, whether that's listening to this podcast, whether that's reaching out to you and having you guys come in, or it's utilising loads of free services that are out there. But there's lots of things out there that business leaders can do to support the running of their business. Very quickly, I want to just end on, and we mentioned before about getting people back into the workplace, and you were saying about the client in Leeds with the shiny office and the gym and things like that. So on one of our previous podcasts, we had Phil Pond from Scarlet Opus talk, and if anybody hasn't listened to it, go back and re-listen. And he's an insight specialist, So he looks at trends before they come and before they happen. And one of the things we talked about with him, which is exactly what you were just saying, was workplace design. What makes your place attractive for somebody to come and work there? Now, it's not about having a shiny, attractive office in a city centre. Actually, it could be that you're in Malton, but you've got a really quirky office and you've got some textures in there. You've got some beautiful artwork on the wall. It's a period building. And people walk in and go, wow, this is lovely. It's got to be a nice place for people to want to come. What they don't want is a sterile square room with no colour, no texture, no windows, no light, no plants. So, you know, attracting people to come and work for you is not just about what's your business offering, what's the job you're offering, what's the salary and the package. It's if I want you to come and work with my people, what are my people like? But what's the environment like? What's that workplace design? And is this a place where you kind of go, yeah, I can see myself there? And there's a big piece there about if you're trying to get people back in the workplace, well, think about what that looks like.
Yeah. It's that old question: what's in it for them? And and just drifting back to culture briefly, and trying to change it as well. My definition of culture arrived to me years ago, and it's how people think, feel, and behave every day. So if you think about that when it's good, that's great. If you think about changing how people think, feel, and behave, well, that's a job, isn't it? That's going to take a bit of time, and it's on you as leaders and you need managers, and you need to be good at that.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. So if nothing else, people take away from this and go, if you want to improve your culture, think about how people. Well, I've written it down. So think, feel, and behave. Absolutely. I think that's a really good parting piece of advice.
Yeah. Lovely.
Fab. Oh, do you know what? It's been amazing. It's been really good to talk to you. I think we've covered quite a lot. We've talked about blue tree thinking. We've talked about well-being, flexible working, attendance. We've talked about some of the really good work that you've done with the cricket club and obviously with the cooperative and culture. And I think, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
Yeah, as we do. And I'm sure we could have taught the rest of the... It's not anymore, is it? But anyway.
But I think, if anybody wants to hear any of our future podcasts, please make sure that you like and subscribe. There are other ones for you to go back and re-watch and re-listen. And I will hopefully see everybody again very soon.